I need some traction. You need some traction.
Today's Traction webinar is brought to you by Boast AI and Launch Academy in partnership with Growth Lasers. Super stoked today because we got over 600 people signed up, and it's a session on how to build a 10x product strategy. Awesome speaker here. Gibson Biddle was a VP of product at Netflix starting in 2005. In 2010, he became the chief product officer of Chegg, a textbook rental and homework help company that went public in 2014. Today, Gibbs a teacher, speaker, writer, and advisor. He's also been to our live Traction conference in Vancouver, and always the feedback's been phenomenal. As Gib mentioned, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Tell us where you're joining in from, your name, and you can also use the Slido link that I just dropped to everyone to answer any polls or anything else. Awesome. Gib, without further ado, please take it away.
Cool. Thanks, Lloyd. Hey, Rebecca, where are you coming from today?
Hi, guys. Super nice to meet you. I'm from Berlin. I'm actually in Lisbon at the Web Summit right now. But yeah, I'm co-founder and CPO of Remy. We're a culture building platform for remote teams. Super excited about the session.
Great. Thanks for volunteering. All right, I'm going to dive into it. We'll introduce our other panelists a little bit later. Very early in my career, I built something called Almost Preschool. This is the first time this is my first hit product, and I'm older than dirt. This is probably, gosh, 1995 maybe. And I created a company called Creative Wonders and sold it to this dude. This is Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank. And he was the CEO of the learning company, and then helped to make that company bigger and better, and sold it to Mattel for $4 billion, which was really cool at the time, except 1 year later, Mattel spun the learning company back out of the company. And where before it had been worth $4 billion, it was worth only $400 million. And for me, this is a big lesson in the importance of building hard to copy advantage. So what I had failed to do is build hard to copy advantage, and everybody copied our work, and that's why we were devalued. So this is me. This is Reed Hastings. Reed Hastings is the CEO of Netflix, and the international audience doesn't always know this, but Netflix began as a DVD by mail company. So here's Reed in a sea of DVDs. He interviewed me for the VP of product role, and he really had two questions. The first question he asked, hey, Gib, can you delight customers? And I said, yes, I built Sesame Street Elmo's Preschool. And luckily his kids had used it and enjoyed it. And then his second question was, hey, Gib, can you do consumer science? And I knew I'd asked him what he wanted his legacy to be. It wasn't to build a worldwide streaming empire. It was to build the system where we could test anything and everything to figure out what resonated with customers and what didn't. As he would say, I'm not like Steve Jobs. I don't have an inherent sense of people's taste. But if we can test anything, that's the consumer science tactic that'll help us to build a great business. Lloyd gave an introduction to me. The key thing is I joined Netflix. I look for startups with a proof of concept that are ready to scale, and then I scale them. So in 2010, I went on to my next startup, which is called Chegg. It's a textbook rental and homework help company. And today we're going to spend about an hour. The first chapter of this talk, if you will, I'm going to share these 3 strategy frameworks for you. And then I'm going to pretend that I'm the head of product today at Netflix. And I'm going to pretend that I'm talking to 1,000 peeps in the organization and share the strategy. And then I'm going to bring it home with 2 juicy, what would you do Netflix cases. These are modern day cases. The first will be that case about, hey, should Netflix launch this Netflix party? And I'll share a second one at the end. So I want to dive into it with 3 frameworks. Is everything good? So here we go. My definition of strategy, I'm going to take you back to 400 BC for a moment. Strategy for me is a route to continuing power in a significant market. This is Hamilton Helmer. He's a professor at Stanford in economics, of all things. But imagine it's 400 BC and you're an explorer. You're in China, essentially Southeast Asia, and you found that the silk and these riches and these gold and the silver, and as an explorer, your job is to figure out how to get it to the economic powerhouse of the world, which is London. And should this route be by land or by sea? And the answer was by land. what you see in the photo here is the Silk Road. The Silk Road became this powerful highway of a huge market of economics. It has stood the test of time. This section here is protected by the Great Wall of China. And so it was durable, it was hard to copy. And that's really the way I think about strategy as an exploration and how you build this hard to copy long-term success. Why do I focus on strategy? For me as a product leader, it helps me to do the hardest thing, which is to communicate an inspired vision of the future. And it blends both discipline and chaos. So that the challenge of innovation is that invention is built, it comes out of the dirt, out of this primordial ooze. And if you overmanage it, you don't get these surprising results. But strategy is a nice way of providing just a little bit of discipline to help bring cool things out of the chaos. And strategy for me is about forming hypotheses to DHM. And I'll share what that means in a second. And then it facilitates prioritization. As product leaders, we can do anything. We just can't do everything. So if you had a list of 100 things to do, how would you choose the top 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or 10? And then as companies grow, people get confused about, hey, what's going on? How does all this stuff fit together? And strategy helps to communicate a plan. So I'm going to share 3 frameworks for you. The first, I call it GLEE. It spells something. It's about getting big, leading, and then expanding further in the future. It's really about a product vision. GEM model is how you prioritize 3 factors: growth, engagement, and monetization. And DHM is all about how you delight customers in these hard to copy, margin enhancing ways. And each of these models has a purpose. I'm kind of futzing with my screen for a second. The GLEE model provides a long-term product vision. GEM is about how do you get everybody in the building, whether you're in product or tech or sales or marketing, to agree about which is most important: growth, engagement, call me product quality, or monetization. And then DHM is all about forming these hypotheses to compete. So let's get into it. This DHM, for me, the product leader job it's easy to describe, very hard to do, but it's all about these 3 forces: delighting customers in hard to copy, margin enhancing ways. And margin enhancing is just a fancy way of saying make money, some way that you generate profits so they can reinvest to build an even better product for your customer in the future. And in chat, can you just give me a yes or a no on whether you're a Netflix member or not, or you use Netflix most of the time? It's okay if you're sharing somebody's account. Netflix doesn't worry about this either. And I'm guessing, you know, if you look at the list here, these are things that delight you about the service. And it took us years of experimentation to discover all these things. What do you see, Lloyd, in the chat? We got plenty of members. Are they all paying? It's looking good. Okay. So delight, it's pretty obvious to all of us, and I could see that folks are members. The tricky part of Netflix was figuring out how the heck to make money. And we started as a DVD by mail company. At first, it was a la carte. So you'd rent 1 disc for $4, and it would show up in the mail like 7 days later. It really sucked. But bet the company on this all-you-can-eat subscription. So today, for about $15 US, most people are getting a lot of stuff. It's not everything they want, but it's an all-you-can-eat subscription. And then we experimented with price and plan tests forever. You probably noticed that each year your price goes up by about $1, and that's the result of these different tests. And really what's going on is Netflix is trying to get a little bit more money so it can get you more of what you want in the future. One of the things that's not obvious about how the Netflix business works is this concept of right-sizing original content investment. So up front, I did a little poll and I asked how many folks use Stranger Things. But Netflix, based on all of its data, it predicted about 100 million people worldwide would watch Stranger Things. Give me a yes if you've watched Stranger Things. I'm sure most of you have. And based on that, they said, okay, we'll invest $500 million in the series. And then they looked at the data and they made a guess that 20 million freaks like me would enjoy BoJack Horseman. And based on that, they invested 100 million. And this is the idea of right sizing, and it's a huge source of economic power for Netflix today. So here's the question I'm going to put to you. If I gave you 500 million bucks, I love it that Ian Nicole likes BoJack, you're a freak, like me. If I give you 500 million bucks to start a startup to compete with Netflix, what would you find hard about that? So what makes Netflix hard to copy? Rebecca, what's the hard to copy advantage that Netflix has built over the years? Oh, if you haven't used Slido, 1 second, Rebecca, just hold up your phone as though you're taking a photo of that QR code. A link will magically pop up, and then you can enter some words and let me know what you think is hard to copy. For you, Rebecca, what are some of the hard to copy advantages the company's created?
Should I say it or post it?
Oh, I want to hear your voice.
Okay. I guess it's the data. I guess it's exactly what you showed us, the ability to predict what works.
Yes. Cool. And my friend Caroline, are you there? Caroline Gorman?
Yes, I'm here.
What else makes Netflix hard to copy?
I think it's really the monetary investment to get that type of technology up and running. And then also, as you mentioned, the content investment is very high to have original content.
Yeah, so I think it's working on everybody's phones. I don't know why it's not working on my screen. But if you look down, Caroline, what are the key themes that you see from the Slido results from the audience?
Ooh, actually, I don't
That's
see
not working for
that.
you? Okay.
Yeah.
So, hey, Kathy, I think you're from Dublin. Are you able to see the results, or what for you do you think is hard to copy about Netflix? So the big themes that I see from the audience, it's the contents, the original content. My friend,
I think no one said this, but I think they've built a massive following community, and that community is hard. There are people who are engaging and meeting up to do Netflix get-togethers and stuff. The community is very hard to replicate. Even if somebody comes up tomorrow, it's just very difficult, right? Unless you're an Apple and already have a community.
Yeah, so I'm staring down at the results, and the themes that I saw, somewhat related to what you said. Netflix has a very strong brand. You trust the company with your credit card each and every month. Lots of unique technology. I saw examples in the Slido. Personalization is a good example. Their ability, the recommendations, if you will. Netflix, we try to create a network effect. The network effect, if you think about Facebook, the huge advantage they have is that network effect. What we finally were able to do, and we failed, I'll tell you some about our failures on this. Every screen in the world where you can watch a movie or TV show is magically pre-wired to let you watch Netflix. And then I saw lots of original content, but the fancy term for that is Netflix has a huge advantage in their economies of scale. So Netflix, by virtue of supporting 220 million members, can spend about 20 billion a year on content, where poor Amazon is only able to spend 8 billion. I just like saying poor Amazon. Or then Hulu and Disney combined, it's right around 8 billion as well. And then Apple is only spending 2 billion, poor Apple. So these are generally the themes that you think about what it takes to build hard to copy advantage. So I've shared with you here on the screen all the theories and hypotheses about Netflix, how it tried to delight customers in these hard to copy, margin enhancing ways. And you'll notice here, green is good. So those first 5 things or so delighted, they built hard to copy advantage and then improved the business. In large part, the way that Netflix improved the business was more delight, better retention. So in the old days, Netflix sucked. About 10% of the customers canceled every month. 2005, about 5% canceled every month. And today, only 2% cancel each month. And so if you improve retention, that's how you improve the business here. Look at all those things that failed, the red, the social. We tried to connect people with their friends to get great movie ideas from their friends. And we failed in that. We were trying to build a network effect. It didn't work. And then at the very bottom, you see some of the current theories and hypotheses. Interactive stories. Has anybody watched Bandersnatch? Let me know in the chat. They're experimenting with games. You'll soon see examples of storytelling via AR and VR. So this is how you can think about these theories and hypotheses about how you'll delight, in hard to copy, margin enhancing ways. And the mega issue is Netflix built a world-class company, I think, but they only had to get it right about a third of the time. And this is the real value of building hard to copy advantage. So if you're into this, I did a series on Medium, and there's a link on that page that I built for you at the end. I take you through 10 different tools, models, and frameworks that help you define your product strategy in a step-by-step way. I'm going to share with you the result of that. So now I'm going to pretend that I'm the current head of product at Netflix. I'm back. And I want to share what my sort of guess of what the product strategy would look like. I don't have unlimited time, so I'm sharing sort of 4 high-level theories and hypotheses. So you are all now the 180 odd folks at Netflix, the product organization. Just want to remind folks of the positioning of the product. Netflix is a movie subscription service that delivers fast, easy entertainment in a friendly, straightforward way. And the brand promise, because that's so important and so hard to copy, we would never say this to a customer, but we were trying to build a product where movie enjoyment was made easy. Neve Savage, my brand partner at Netflix, wanted to tattoo that phrase to my forearm, which you can see I didn't do. But this is the product that we set out to build, and I'm guessing for most people, it feels that way. And then the product vision, this is where I used the GLEE model. And the GLEE model, if you look at the first letters, it spells stuff. But the first thing we set out to do was to get big on DVD, essentially build a beachhead, this small area of success that we could gradually expand to. And our next step in this vision was to lead streaming. And this actually happened in January of 2007. We launched with 300 stinky, steamy romance movies, which is code for something else. And then got better and better and better at it until finally we were an all digital service. And by 2010, the international expansion began in Canada. It was the first streaming only service for Netflix in Canada. But now you can see that it's gone worldwide. And then the fourth big step is original content. And for the historians out there, we actually tried original content back in the DVD era, and it failed. But finally, later, when we had this huge economy of scales, the original content worked with a successful launch of House of Cards in 2013. And then as a product leader, you always want to have a hypothesis about what's next. And this continues forever. And so these are just hypotheses. They may be right or not. But the next big step for the company, and my guess is interactive stories and games, are the thing that's going to be as important today or important in 10 years as original content is today. So this is the long-term product vision using the GLEE model. You can see the G, the L, and the E in the first 3 steps. So if you got kids out there, I'm going to share with you some of the interactive content where you decide the story. A favorite for me is Captain Underpants' epic choice-o-rama. You drive the story. And what did you see about Bandersnatch? Did a lot of people watch it or not, Lloyd, from the chat? I always keep you on your toes, Lloyd. I see some folks that loved it, which is awesome. Okay, and then yes, there's Kimmy. Should Kimmy make out or should she plan the wedding? And these are examples. The way that Netflix measures the delight, if you will, the high-level engagement metric is monthly retention. And I shared with you that at the beginning of the startup, when things sucked, it was 10% canceled. Today, it's only 2%. But this is our high-level engagement metric, the proxy that we use to describe whether the product's getting better or not. And here are 4 of our high-level theories and hypotheses about how we will delight our customers in these hard-to-copy, margin-enhancing ways. And I want to bring you down to that watching experience on the left. This is, I love Netflix for doing this, sort of a focus on the invisible. So how do you keep making that experience better and better? And I'm also sharing with you something I call this SMT model. So each strategy has a proxy metric. So the proxy metric for creating a better watching experience at Netflix, it's the percentage of customers who watch at least 40 hours in a month. Today, that's probably at about 50%. If they could drive it to 60%, then that would improve retention. And the reason you have these proxy metrics is retention is so slow, or so hard to move, you need more sensitive measures. And then look across on that watching experience row. What are the examples, the projects or tactics of that? Well, it's all about ultra high definition, set box integration, shared viewing, this Netflix party idea, doing amazing job with lip sync algorithms, taking a film like Lupin and within a week, translating into 40 different languages so it can launch to 190 countries all around the world, making it so that when you start up a film, in the old days, if I found out it was international, I would quit right away. But when Lupin came up, I was like, whoa, I could hardly tell that it was filmed in French and in France. So these are some of the 4, and there's about 6 or 8 high-level hypotheses like this, but this gives you a strong sense of how today we're working to build that hard-to-copy advantage over time. And here's the roadmap. I'm always doing rolling 4-quarter roadmaps. I'm always a little hesitant, and I'll tell you why. But in Q1, and this Q1 is our next quarter, these are some of the important projects. So you can see in that watching experience, we're doing the set-top box integrations. We're talking about this shared viewing. We're doing even better technology to handle better lip dubbing. It's called Netflix dubbing. And you can see how we'll get better and better on mobile devices throughout the world. And the reason I'm hesitant about roadmaps is whenever I share one with a CEO or board member or investor, I'll just simply say I'm very confident about the projects in this next coming quarter. But frankly, I'm going to learn so much that the stuff in Q2, 3, and 4, a lot of it will change. Some of it may go out the window. So don't view it as a commitment by me. But we know how that conversation goes. They say, well, you said that this. And my point is, in the world of consumer science, you're always learning and experimenting in this fast-paced way. And this is really, for me, a storytelling device, helping people to understand how this watching experience will evolve over time. And this is me talking to the whole organization, helping them to understand how all this stuff fits together. At the beginning, last week, I sat down with the head of finance, the CFO, and the head of marketing, and my content partner, and we just had a conversation. And it was, how at a high level would we prioritize these 3 forces: growth, engagement, and monetization? And we decided that we're putting growth first, and our metric for that is year-over-year member growth. And the expectation is we'll grow at 20%, which is phenomenal for a large company. And then our monetization, our way of measuring essentially economic efficiency, our ability to deliver progress, is lifetime value. So for perspective, in 2005, lifetime value for a Netflix customer was about $100. Today, it's 290. And that's really because of that improvement in retention. And then engagement, our proxy metric for that is monthly retention. And today it's at 2%. It saddens me a little to put that third, but it's possible that Netflix is at a point of diminishing returns. One of those points, one reason that people cancel is there's no money in their account. And the second, it's summer and maybe they shouldn't be binge watching. But this, for the overall organization, gives folks a sense of how to prioritize these 3 forces or factors. So with that, I'm going to say thank you. And I'll step back to just being Gib from Bend, Oregon. And what I want to do is play around with some of these tools, these models and frameworks with 2 modern day cases. And this is where I'll bring Caroline and Rebecca. And I have a new panelist friend.
Okay, MJ, he's the world famous, world renowned Iranian sensation product leader, MJ. That's why we invited him on stage.
MJ, can you say hi?
Hi, Gib. Lloyd is too kind. Nice meeting you. We met before, actually, but nice to see you here again.
Yeah, nice to see you. It looks like Caroline, you're there, right, Caroline? Want to say hi?
Sure. I'm Caroline Gorman. I work at Cardlytics. We provide best-in-class user experiences for banking partners to drive their rewards experiences. So cashback rewards.
So you're all the voice of the audience, okay? And so I've got some cases for you. Some folks have been to law school or business school. I'm going to give you a little bit of information. You're allowed to ask questions. I'm hoping you'll get enough data to form your own opinion. And if we're lucky, we might have some debate. So we'll have some virtual chair throwing at each other. So here's the case. It's called Netflix Party. And some interesting stuff here. There's a team of 6 or 7 engineers on Patreon. They actually worked together and they created this Chrome extension that you could download. And so folks can use this idea today, which you download the Chrome extension and then you pick a movie, and now you can be watching together with other Netflix members, even if you're apart. So Kelsey's in Boston, that's my daughter. I could watch Stranger Things at the same time. I could chat, I could do emojis. This is a way to create a social experience. And just so you know, the lawyers from Netflix found a Netflix Party. It's now called Teleparty. So you can find that today. In this case, the real question is, there's engineers at Netflix are eager to build this. They want to build it for real, not this wonky thing where you download a Chrome extension. They just want to make it part of the service. That's the question. And here's how Netflix works. You install this Chrome, the Teleparty works. You open up a video, create your party, and now you can have this social shared experience with your friends. Hey, Rebecca, are you thumbs up or thumbs down on this idea?
I really don't want to say yes or no because I just don't have enough information.
Ah, okay. So so just so you know, Rebecca, I looked at the data from the Wisdom of Crowds, and 3/4 of the audience was leaning forward. They thought it was a good idea. MJ, do you want to make a provisional decision? What's your gut say to you right now?
My gut says Netflix shouldn't do this because this is a phenomenal only specific to COVID, and post-COVID, it doesn't feel like, my gut says it doesn't feel like it's going to be continuing.
Well, it's two sides of the coin. This was something new that happened that might make this super useful. And then I can tell you're a very hopeful person. The world's going to get back to normal. Gosh darn it. Caroline, which way do you lean on this one?
I think I would have to look at it relative to the other trade-offs. Like, what would we not be building instead of this? Although I can personally see the value because I have a son in college,
Yes.
and we do like to watch sports together. So this enables that.
Cool beans. Hey, Lloyd, do you have a gut one way or the other on this one?
I'm gonna defer to the other awesome panelists because I'm here. I have voice time and FaceTime all the time. So we'll defer.
So Rebecca, I'm going to give you some more data. Okay. So here's the data. I told you the story about a social strategy earlier. We had this thing called Netflix Friends, and we killed the feature in 2009. We call it scraping the barnacles. So what happened was, our proxy metric for this was the percentage of Netflix members that connected with at least one friend. And we launched at 2% and it got up to 5%, which wasn't that high. If you're trying to improve retention, you need to get up in the 10 to 20% range. So we killed it. And then one of the first devices we worked with was, we were on the Xbox, we were streaming live, and they said, oh, we got to do this thing called party mode. And I said, I think it's going to be a waste of your time. The best you're going to do is get 5% engagement. They said, no, it's a different audience. We're right. And guess what? It got to 5%. We killed that too in 2010. And then when Netflix was expanding international, they didn't have hundreds of $millions to spend in each country. This is 190 countries. They had this idea that, hey, I watched Bandersnatch, I loved it, and it was magic. I could suggest this movie to a friend that wasn't a member by email, by Twitter, by LinkedIn, by WhatsApp. It was this magical thing. Very, very well executed, and they killed it because only 1 or 2% of folks actually used it. So here's the insight from this. Your friends have really sucky movie tastes. Okay, we thought we could solve that algorithmically, and we couldn't. And then the second issue is you have many guilty pleasures. You don't want your friends to know that you were binge watching Cake Boss last night. So Rebecca, how are you feeling about this right now? The potential launch of Netflix Party, given the consumer insight here.
I feel like you've been talking more about social features rather than the watching experience, and I think that's a little bit different.
Well, the theory here is
I still don't have enough data.
Okay. We'll answer all your questions. So here's even more. This little feature from the 6 engineers at Patreon in the last year, it went from 500,000 folks using it to 5 million. Like, Caroline's son could have found this, right? And all we know is that there's more than 10 million downloads in the Google Play Store. After that, they don't give you any more data. And the engineers at Netflix are super excited about this. They say, hey, we can launch Party on the laptop next month, and we'll be out on all platforms by the end of the year. And the question I'm going to put to you is, will this delight in hard to copy, margin enhancing ways? Should Netflix try social again? Okay, Rebecca, what questions do you have? I can see Greg Lovato wants sports. It's a good hypothesis, live sports. Go ahead, Rebecca. You got any questions for me?
So I really want to understand first how this, well, we know how it works, but I want to understand what the difference will be in what Netflix would launch to
Yes. Good
what these engineers launched. Because what I'm trying to understand is, are these numbers actually replicable for Netflix? Like, is this a good analogy to draw?
Got it. So when the Netflix engineers execute it, it will be magical. So there won't be the wonkiness of downloading Chrome extension. It'll be like Netflix is today. You'll say, hey, I want to start a Netflix party. It'll make it wicked easy to choose a title and reach out to your friends and start watching at the same time. And then it'll be fun. You can chat with each other, do emojis, whatever you want. So just imagine it's going to be an amazing, seamless experience. And the question is, in today's context, will it get up to 10 or 15% of Netflix members using it? That's the real question. Which way do you lean on that one, Rebecca? Is there any chance that 10% of Netflix members today will use this feature?
I would probably lean more towards yes, but I'm really hesitant to do anything to just implement this without, testing it first in the Netflix environment.
Okay, so you want to test it, right? You want to test it, right? Okay,
yeah.
cool. And then I see in the chat, there's some complexity. What happens if you want to stop and go to the bathroom? These kinds of things. Caroline, are you leaning forward on this, or are you leaning back?
Yeah, I think you definitely have to test it. I personally think that things are moving this direction,
Yeah.
like market-wise. If you look at the way people game today, everybody is more comfortable doing things online together.
Yes.
So it does seem to be the way the world is moving.
Yes.
But testing the user experience, I think, is key.
And what would be your guess? What percentage of Netflix members would use this if you put it out in an A/B test? What would be your guess?
My guess would be 5%, and 5% might be great as a starting point, and until you evolve the user experience.
Yep.
So 5% to me would be a success.
And then maybe within a year or two, you get it to 10%, and you'd feel pretty good about that, correct?
Yes.
Okay, cool beans. MJ, which way do you want to go on this one?
I have a question about the previously launched features by Netflix. What have been the adoption for those features?
Yeah,
have you ever had
we spent 5 years getting adoption of that social friends idea from 1% to 5%, and just couldn't make it impactful enough. And we worked hard at it, just didn't work. For some reason, social in the context of Netflix and movies wasn't particularly successful. Okay, let me ask the question, esteemed panelists. Is this a hard to copy feature? Is this hard to copy?
No.
No. Tell me more, MJ. How do you know it's not hard to copy? And my friends in the chat, is this hard or easy to copy? Yes. Andrew's saying, no, someone's already done it. You can get this from Hulu, you can get this Amazon, you can get this from Disney Plus, right? This is not hard to copy. Okay, so now these competitors have done it. Does that inspire you to do it more or less? What do you think about that one? Caroline, this information that everybody else is doing this, did that inspire you to, no, we got to do it too? Or said, no, maybe it's not helping to build hard to copy advantage? Which way do you go?
Yeah, I think the margin enhancing ways is the important question there. Like, is it a differentiator for Netflix specifically? What is the key differentiator for Netflix?
Yep.
Is it the original content? And how important it is to Netflix, the Netflix audience, to watch Netflix specific original content together?
Yeah, so the thing they want to be, it's all about movie enjoyment made easy, and increasingly about the original content. And interesting, 5 or 10 years from now, it might be about interactive. You know, the interactive games, and you drive the story along. This might be important 5 or 10 years from now. Okay, are you leaning forward or back, Caroline, on this one?
I think it goes back, for me, it always goes back to, like, what are the things we wouldn't do instead? And are those potentially bigger margin enhancers or profit drivers over this specific feature right now?
Okay, so I'll be head of product at Netflix. I think social is important enough. I'm going to give you a team, Caroline, to a big one, to execute social ideas. Does this feel like one of the best social ideas you could execute, or you want to do something different?
If competitors are doing it, and if it kind of depends if it's starting to emerge as a table stakes feature. If
Yeah.
it is, then I would definitely invest in it as an idea to test,
Got it.
but not necessarily to build. I'm hedging a lot, I know, but
I heard a lot of conversation, Rebecca. Which way you go, leaning back or forward?
I think I'm leaning forward, but only based on potential to integrate this into an interactive experience.
In
And I
the
do
future.
think
Got it.
exactly.
Yeah.
So this idea of, if you can decide where a story goes together, that could be super interesting. And then it gets into a realm where it's getting into a hard to copy space again.
Got it.
So
Okay. So for some reason, Slido's not working on my screen. I apologize, but I can see it, and everybody can see it if you answer the question using your mobile device. So we've changed hearts and minds a little, esteemed panelists, Caroline, MJ, and Rebecca. We walked into this early, 3/4 said yes, and now only 42% say yes. Okay, interesting, right? Cigar sales biz would always say it's table stakes. This could be subjective, and the point from Cigar is correct, that if you want something to be happen, you say we have to do it because everyone else is doing it. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what Netflix decided on this. They chose not to launch, and Caroline, they chose not even to test the idea. They were so confident it would only get to 5%. So I just want to share some of the insight and some of the learnings. The first is, we are not our customers. So we are all freaks. We are using Google Slides and Slido and Zoom in the middle of the day, right? And so we're all very technically adept, et cetera. Caroline, I'm very confident that your son from college, he's, freakish too, right? And this is not really what all of the Netflix members are. In fact, this is what Netflix is about. At the end of the day, Netflix is about movie enjoyment made easy. And most of the time, you just want to fade into your couch and watch a movie. You don't want to be chatting, et cetera, at the same time. And then think about Netflix discipline here in choosing to say no. They don't want to create a Swiss Army knife with all the blades and nobody knows which one to use. To create a simple service, you have to say no a lot. And this is what Netflix has done very well over the years. And in this case, the assessment was it probably wouldn't get beyond 5% usage. And if you can't get a lot of delight, then you don't have a shot at building the hard to copy advantage or building the margin. You can't improve retention if only 5% of your customers are using the feature. And in this case, by definition, this is easy to copy because everybody's done it already. And for Netflix, this is all about, Caroline, you were bringing it back to the brand and the positioning, which I appreciated. It's all about movie enjoyment made easy. And think about the discipline in saying no to this kind of stuff. And just a little bit of consumer insight that, yes, social works really well for everything that Facebook does, and it works great with Spotify and music. It doesn't work so well. Now, I have the ability to ask pals, heads of products at these different companies, especially the ones that have left, and guess what the engagement of Disney Plus and Hulu is? Only 2% are using this. So they sort of wish they hadn't done it at this point. Okay, I got one more juicy case for you. It's a more straightforward one. It's a COVID time period case as well. The question is, should Netflix auto cancel their inactive members? So I'll give you a little bit more context for this. Eddie Wu is the product manager for growth and new members at Netflix. And he's digging in the dirt and he notices that 0.5% of Netflix members haven't even used the service in the last 12 months. So every month they're paying their $15 a month. And every month they're not coming to the website. Every month they're not watching any movies, 0 movies. That's 0.5%. And Eddie's scratching his head thinking, how do I feel about this? And he says, you know what? What if we auto canceled all of these members? And if we did this, by the way, we'd lose $100 million. And the question I'm going to put to you is, we already know the margin story. We're going to lose $100 million. But is there enough delight here? And is there enough hard to copy advantage to outweigh the $100 million loss? Should Netflix launch auto cancel for all inactive customers? All right, Caroline, you want to start? How do you feel about this case? Do you have any gut on this one?
Oh, wow. I think I have some other questions. So is the 100 million annual loss, is that net, like net of cost?
Yep, it's everything. You're just going to lose $100 million. Yep.
Yeah, I don't know how customers, you might think customers would appreciate this, that you're putting money back in their wallet for them.
Yeah.
However, they might also not appreciate it because you're making assumptions about them and why they're not using it. I think instead I would try to re-engage these customers and figure out why they're not using it.
Yeah. So Caroline, you're going to re-engage them and you're not going to hear anything from them. They're not even going to answer your email. Nothing. Nothing's going to happen.
Yeah, I think I would not cancel them.
Okay, so you're just going to take their money, right?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think I might try to nudge them to get them to re-engage. But if they don't, I think I would do nothing.
Okay, so Rebecca, what's the potential delight in doing this?
Judging by what you just said, absolutely zero. They're not even going to notice it, or they're not going to react to it. But I find it really hard to answer this because I'm still wrapping my head around what's the benefit for Netflix to actually engage in this activity? Like, why wouldn't you just let it rest? I mean, you don't need to interact with them. You don't need to do anything. They can just sit there. You don't have to focus your product efforts on them. So
yeah, here's what I'm trying to tease out. What's the delight in this? And what's the hard to copy advantage Netflix could build by doing this? MJ, do you have any thoughts on this one?
Brand.
Okay, so MJ saying, how would you feel about a company that notices nobody's using the service and they automatically cancel? They stop taking your money. I don't know if any of you are old enough, but in the 90s, AOL, internet service provider, there was a person who recorded a phone call for 8 hours. They were trying to cancel their service. And the customer service person on the phone wouldn't let them do it. And that tape recording went viral. And it was a very, very negative phone call. And it hurt AOL a lot. And it actually built distrust, the opposite of what you want to do with the brand. And then to MJ's point, if we think back to the 4 things that are hard to copy, brand was one of them. So the idea here is you could build lots of delight by doing the right thing and build an even stronger world-class brand. And this is why you might be willing to lose $100 million. Caroline, for you, is losing $100 million, is this a high stakes decision or a low stakes decision?
Depends on your total revenue, but I
Okay.
mean, to me,
Very
it's
good.
high. Yeah.
Okay, so it feels like high stakes until you think about the magnitude. This is $100 million against 25 billion in revenue. Okay, probably not as scary as you thought, right? What's the second reason that this is actually a low stakes decision? How could you argue that this is no big deal, Rebecca or MJ?
I guess because it's the people that aren't engaging, so maybe they're not going to be actually making an impact on your brand.
Yep.
But I mean, that's also a higher, like, that's an assumption. That's a risky assumption.
MJ, you got some thoughts on this?
Yeah, I actually share the same answer. I agree with Rebecca. The people that like sign up for a trial, they might not ever want to come back to Netflix. They would just want to try and leave forever.
I actually, do you mind if I jump in? I was thinking it might actually be good for customer acquisition. I just thought about that play. If people feel like there's no risk because to trying the service because it will get auto canceled. If you're not using it, then your customer acquisition could actually go way up and your customer acquisition costs go down.
And the world noticed. Here's the headlines from Variety. Netflix will start automatically canceling inactive accounts. And folks were impressed by this. Now, of course, you can't be a punk startup to do this. You know, it's hard to lose that $100 million, but Netflix did it. And I just want to share with you the insights from Eddie Wu. The first was, it's building that hard to copy advantage in the brand. And the second, his feeling was it was worth spending the $100 million because this was an investment in doing the right thing and building an even stronger world-class brand. And then also felt by magnitude and reversibility, this was a low stakes decision. So I'm going to bring things home and then I'll answer a few questions. The reason I'm way into strategy is it helps you to find that route, that exploration to continuing power in a significant market. We have a woman here that's exploring, you know, it's not going to be the Silk Road from China to London, but it's going to be some fundamental new vectors of innovation. And think of product strategies as your hypotheses on how you will delight customers in these hard to copy, margin enhancing ways. And I've shared a bunch of frameworks, but they help you to combine discipline and chaos without squeezing the life out of the chaos. And these tools help you to communicate an inspired vision of the future. So I'm going to bring it home with this. This is what product leadership is really about. If you want to build a ship, don't drum up the people to gather wood, divide the work, and give orders. Teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea. And this is a real lesson in doing the hardest thing as product leaders, which is provide that inspired vision of the future. I will close out. This is my guilty pleasure. One of my favorites from last 18 months. I'm going to stop sharing the slides so you can see more of me. Rebecca, you were awesome. Thanks so much. Caroline, awesome. Thank you so much. MJ, awesome. Thank you very much. Hey, Rebecca, I was in Berlin last week. It was fun. It was with Soma.
Already.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice one.
I mean, it was my first international travel, but it was worth doing. Okay, Lloyd, I'm happy to answer some questions. Just tell me what to do.
Definitely. There's a couple of questions here, and I'm happy to see we have other panelists here, and especially with Rebecca tuning in from Lisbon there. It's amazing. So Hossam asks, is there a difference between product and company strategy, especially if the company builds a single product?
Yeah, for sure. So I've been talking about product strategy. The bridge for me between product strategy and company strategy is actually in that GLEE model, okay? So think about Netflix today as a company. They've got sort of four things from that GLEE model. They're streaming, they've got original content, they're international, and they're experimenting with the interactive stories and games. And so the key thing is the whole company needs to have their story straight about how much to invest today in each. And my guess is we can keep it simple, a third on streaming, international, original content, And then let's go like 32, 32, 32, and probably about 4 percentage points. Very small, way to hack and experiment with a couple of hypotheses, interactive games and stories in the future. So I've been talking about product strategy, but it's actually that GLEE model or the product vision that helps link to the overall company strategy, which is going to be quite different from what I've described here. The other thing is the GEM model, getting everybody in the building, get their story straight about how to force rank growth, engagement, and monetization is super helpful. And that sort of gets at the transition from product strategy to company strategy as well. Strategy is a lot about trying to gain alignment, and both of those models help to align the product strategy with the company strategy.
Awesome. There's another question here on prioritization, right? Because sometimes what you don't build is equally important. So how do you prioritize initiatives across the org, given shorter term that have higher certainty of positive returns, right? A lot of people focus on, how do I prioritize short term, long term? Yeah.
Okay, so I'm always the head of product. Caroline, she kept, said, hey, I don't know if this is more or less important than other projects. This is the Netflix party. So my job is to make sure the overall product organization, that we're investing those resources correctly. So for instance, I kind of just did that a moment before. I might put 5% of the product organization's resources against the interactive stories like Bandersnatch. I might put 5% against games, Stranger Things on mobile in Poland. And then I would allocate, what percentage of effort in creating a better watching experience? Ooh, that's like a 20%er today. How much should we put into personalization? Ooh, that's a 20%er today. So that's me like trying to give each swim lane or pod or squad the right amount of resources. And then within a swim lane, I let people do their jobs, okay? So if you were the product leader for social, Caroline, not a fun job at Netflix, do you think Netflix party is the most important thing, or do you have better ideas? I frankly don't care. The key thing is I'm probably only giving your team, Caroline, because I'm not a big believer in social and movies, 5% of total resources, but you get to decide what are the projects or tactics in that area. So if you think about it, my allocation of resources is providing sort of a roadmap in the long term. And then in the short term, I just let the product leaders who lead each of those pods or squads, I let them decide.
Awesome. There's a question here on, there's a bunch of questions. How do you create a strong 3 to 5 year product company vision strategy going from like services to in-house build products? But like, what are your top 3 pieces of advice or ingredients for creating a strong product vision strategy?
Yeah, so let's go back to the GLEE model. How do you create a strong 3 to 5 year product company vision? Honestly, so I'll do another example. My next startup is called Chegg. I showed up at Chegg. Chegg does textbook rental. And I said, okay, this is easy. The big orange boxes going back and forth in the mail with textbooks. What's next? Well, at Netflix, it was streaming was next. I said, well, okay, we're going to go from paper textbooks going back and forth in the mail to e-textbooks, right? And so my vision was get big on paper textbooks, lead e-textbooks. And then I said we were going to go into other student services, except I was wrong. E-textbooks still hasn't happened. So I revised the vision, get big on paper textbooks. That was correct. The second was expand into high margin digital services, which is to say I didn't know the answer. But one year we bought 6 different startups. That was the fastest way to experiment. And the answer became clear. We got big on paper textbooks going back and forth in the mail. And then we led this high margin digital service, which is called Homework Help, helping students with their homework. And then the third step is other student services, like helping connect a student with an internship or their first job. So I'm just saying that for the product vision, you just you got to start with your overall hypothesis. This is what we're getting big on. This is what's next. This is what's next. And then it's a hypothesis. You experiment to see what works and what doesn't. And everything I just described there also relates pretty tightly to the company strategy as well. I used to be able to see the question, but I think I did a reasonable job of answering that question.
I think you did. Any of the Carolyn, Rebecca, or MJ, any comments there? Thoughts?
I am curious, like, as a startup, like as a Netflix as a startup, and how the strategy evolved, right? You said you were mailing DVDs originally, and I remember those days.
Yeah.
But you said the user experience was terrible, and I do remember some of that as well.
Yep.
I'm just, I'm curious, like, what were the signals that led you to, radically changing your strategy to really trying to be first to stream? Or I think that was your strategy, to be first to stream, but.
Yep. Yeah. So, okay. So the main thing was the invisible. Just kept getting better at DVD by mail. So one year, all we did was figure out how do we get the DVD to our customers the next day in the mail. Turned out we had 20 hubs throughout the US, and we built it out to 100. That's how we did it. But that was invisible to a customer. And we had a very important proxy metric for that: percentage of customers who got their discs next day in the mail, which went from 60% all the way up to like 95%. The streaming. The controversy was, when do you launch it? So you need to be big enough to afford content, and internet bandwidth needs to be good enough too. And we debated this a lot. It could have been January 2006. It could have been January of 2008. It really didn't matter. And we launched with these 300 really sucky titles. The code was steamy romance, which is code for something that's worse. It was the only stuff we could afford. And then we just started learning. And our proxy metric for that was the percentage of members that watched at least 15 minutes in a month. We launched at 5%. 5% of our customers watched at least 15 minutes in a month. By the end of the first year, 20% of our members watched at least 15 minutes in a month. Caroline, are you ready to invest more in that when you see that growth?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Right? No big inflection point. We're just looking at the data. Like, seems like things are working. And then how do you move that proxy from 5% to 20% to 50%? We experimented a lot. The answers were, let people watch where they want to watch. Get from the damn laptop to a TV. Get great content. Like, that was hard. It turns out the content we could get was all episodic TV content. You have a box set of 15 years of Seinfeld. Like, those guys aren't able to sell the DVDs, but they could give us the rights to stream Seinfeld. And that was like finding money in their couch, in the crevices of their couch. It was cool. Anyways, it sounds easy in hindsight. It's really hard when you're, in the fog of war. And the key thing were these proxy metrics that just kept telling us, were we on the right path or not? In Friends and Social, we launched at 2%. And after 5 years, we're at 5%. Okay, let's kill that puppy and take all those resources and put them against personalization. Where, by the way, our proxy metric went from, it was at launch, 5% of our members rated at least 50 movies in the first 2 months of the service. By 3 years, 30% rated at least 50 movies. Like, ooh, okay. Those are all the signals. And like, of course, we're gonna take all the Friends and Social team and we're gonna put them in personalization. We're gonna double down. Anyways, this is how it works in real time. So the high level for me, this is what I think is so cool. You have a plan. That's what strategy is. But then you experiment. That's what the consumer science is. Like, your plan is your plan, and it works or it doesn't. That's where you learn the consumer science. And then the really cool thing that is underrated by everyone is the importance of culture. How do you create a company, an environment that values experimentation? That's just as happy with a failure as it is with a success, for the virtue of learning. That's sort of a consumer science insight machine. So those three forces of plan, strategy, consumer science, and culture, because culture's where all of this judgment, like we just share judgment with each other. It's actually the culture of a company that forms the judgment, because most employees come and go every 5 years, but the culture is forever, which is way cool.
Awesome. I think, we're at the top of the hour. There's a couple more questions here. Maybe we take it. What's your method for creating proxy metrics is one.
Yeah. So on that special page, there's like a 12-part essay on how to define your product strategy. I think it's essay number 5, how to define your proxy metric. So it's freaking hard. One thing that surprised people is at Netflix, we could debate these things 3, 6, or 9 months. The basic idea is, can you find the data? Can you move the data? Does it correlate with your high-level engagement metric? At Netflix, it's engagement. And what's the smallest increment of value for a customer that you can measure? So I told you the proxy for streaming, percentage of members that watched at least 15 minutes in a month. The shortest TV episode was 15 minutes long. That's why we chose that very specific timeline. Anyways, read the essay. I mean, one thing I will say is do not use averages. Averages hide way too much data. It's usually percentage of customers who do at least this much of something as a way of measuring, are you creating customer value?
What was the evaluation process of the branding effect in case 2, or was there some kind of believing that the brand effect will exceed 100 million?
Yeah. So here's the wild thing, like consumer science, the idea is that we test things and we can know everything, but we can't. Okay. So in that last case, it's impossible to measure the brand effect of giving up those $100 million. It's a bit of a leap of faith. And this is the thing with A/B testing. A/B testing, you can't have all of the data. And this is why I love that you have the data and then you apply human judgment. What I love is, as humans, we're still needed. You can't turn us into AI bots. Short answer, Netflix could not, measure how much brand advantage they were creating by auto-canceling. But they felt it was the right thing to do because it would delight customers in these hard to copy ways where you lost $100 million. But the delight and hard to copy effect was well worth the while.
Definitely. And the media is huge anyway. The media that comes out of it, all the press and everything else that they did it. Last question here. When prioritizing projects, how do you measure or think about organizational capacity beyond just dollars? How do you manage capacity and avoid dilution of effort distractions?
Yeah, so I rarely use dollars. For me, every swim lane, pod, or squad in my organizations, there is a proxy metric. One metric that helps me to understand, are they creating both customer and shareholder value? The one proxy for the social strategy, percentage of members that connected with at least one friend. Didn't grow enough. It didn't create delight. I told Brent Avery's job was, when he launched streaming, the percentage of members that watched at least 15 minutes a month. Like, that's customer value. And the idea was he was going to improve retention over time by delivering instant movies. And over time, retention would improve, which is how you improve the margin. So the short answer, imagine knowing what your job is by one metric. So mine was improve retention, or, they were going to kill me, right? I mean, it's a joke, but it's sort of a joke. Megan Stern, her job was to create a simpler service. Very wild proxy. In the very first session, this is in the DVD era, what percent of customers added at least 3 titles to their movie list in their very first session? Was the service fast and simple and easy enough to drive that? Initial metric was like 60% of members added at least 3 titles to their movie list in their very first session. They just joined the service. and she drove it from 60% all the way up to like 95%. She created a simpler service, more customer value, better retention, more shareholder value. But I'm just trying to point out how amazing it can be if you know what your job is by a proxy metric. It's no longer subjective.
Awesome. I have two questions actually. One, is it appropriate in any company to have the CTO also run product? And what could go wrong with a strategy like that?
Yeah, honestly, this is all very much defined by the skills of these people. So for instance, I grew up as an English major. I happened to find writing code to be interesting, like writing a paper. And so I'm very adept at managing product managers and designers and kind of consumer data people. I would be a horrible person to manage engineers, right? So I've always paired with my technology partner. You know, I would run product, that person would run technology. In other cases, imagine if I had real technology skills, maybe it's okay for me to run everything. Imagine a technology person, a CTO, who actually doesn't get nervous in evaluating the look and feel or something, or design. Like maybe they can do it, right? So I think the question is very, very, very dependent on what are the real skills and what are the real interests and what are the real passions of that product leader. Because I know very bright, technically, folks who grew up as engineers and then went on to run product, and they were awesome at it.
And the last question here is, what is the ideal structure of a product team that you've seen work really well?
Yeah, there's no such thing, but
okay.
Create a set of pods, squads, and make sure each has a proxy metric that makes sense. That's going to help. You know,
define for us what a pod or squad is.
Okay. So at Netflix, there was a streaming pod, there was a DVD pod, there was a personalization pod, there was a, you know, we experimented with advertising. There was an advertising pod. We experimented with selling our used discs. There was a original content pod. So these are areas of focus, each of which had a proxy metric. Generally, a product leader for each, generally 2 or 3 designers working with that person, and generally 5 to 50 engineers focused in that pod. But the pod or swim lane or squad, they could describe what they're trying to do. You know, Brent would say, I'm the streaming pod, I'm launching streaming. Todd Yellen would say, I'm the personalization product leader. My job is to connect people with movies they'll love through magic algorithms. So that's what the pods and squads are.
And what are the key roles within that pod and squad?
The key roles, there's a product leader that tend to be a product manager. There are designers, there's data peeps, and then there's engineers, folks that are writing code.
And what is the ideal size of that group? Typically?
It varies. So I'll just tell you what it was for me at Netflix. It was a product leader, 2 or 3 designers, a lot of front-end engineers, quite frankly. So that might have been a dozen, nice. 20, something like that. By the way, I didn't have to worry about all the back-end engineering, the stuff that no customer ever sees, right? You know, like there was the bad year where we put all our data systems and a local data warehouse into Amazon cloud, right? I mean, it was an awesome year when we finally got it, but you can imagine we couldn't innovate as much on what customers would see for a year because we were doing all the heavy lifting of taking our infrastructure from a local data warehouse into Amazon's cloud service.
How do you manage pods cross channels? Example, if you have mobile developers with finite resources, how do you allocate them, pull them in and out?
Yeah, so I've used a very similar tactic at lots of different companies. I call it a quarterly product strategy meeting. We actually we had 2 conversations that I would typically have at a quarterly product strategy meeting. Today, this is with Caroline and Rebecca and MJ. We were doing it in the non-member swim lane, the swim lane that's responsible for bringing on more new members, okay? So I usually spend a day with the product leader from all of the squads, and they share results and learning. They re-articulate their high-level theories and hypotheses, and then we debate. We throw chairs at each other. We try to figure out, at the end of the day, should we launch Party or not? Is it time to try social again? I wrote an essay. Actually, that's like in that 12-part series. I think that's essay number 10 or something, describing how I manage all of these pods and squads at the same time via this tactic of a quarterly product strategy meeting. It's the first thing I ever wrote, and it's got like 10,000 claps on Medium, so people like it.
Should your product roadmap for multi-years be fluid, or there are some people who subscribe to this, let's create a 5-year roadmap and not veer off of it and let's just do that? Is that a thing? Or
no? I was going like that.
What's the longest roadmap you should create? What's the longest term roadmap?
A year. Okay, let's say a year. But think about Glee. Glee's trying to hint at the future. Like right now, Netflix is hinting that 5 years from now, interactive games and stories will be important. Okay, they don't know if they're right or wrong, but they're certainly not going to do a roadmap for 5 years of progression about interactive games and stories, because they don't really know, right? The theory is you're going to be enjoying mobile games on Netflix for the same price you are today. And eventually they'll charge you more money because you're really loving all the cool stuff. You got these interactive games or interactive stories like Bandersnatch or Stranger Things on mobile on Poland, whatever it is.
I love the Mike Tyson quote, everyone has a plan until you're punched in the face. So keep iterating, keep shipping. Yeah. With that, we're going to close this off. Rebecca, Caroline, MJ, thanks for joining in and helping out with this session. Gib, always a pleasure. Yeah. Lots of love, sending you love and peace. Thanks for joining.
Thanks. And sorry.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Great fun, Rebecca, Caroline, MJ.